Hello, we are back with another Fancy Lady Talks with Mercer Boyce and me, Rosie Betts. Come for the boobs, stay for the brains.
Please stay. And also subscribe to the channel, click like if you like the content, and share with people you love because we have some great things to talk about today.
We're not just boobs, people. We're so much more. We're
So much
more.
So much more.
But if we were just boobs, that would also be good because the boobs are fabulous.
It's true.
So today we are back to slow dating. We had touched on slow dating last week, but this week we're specifically talking about, do you want to tell them?
Yeah, we're talking about vulnerability.
Dun dun dun.
Ooh. It's almost like that word, you say that word and people cringe a little. Ooh. But you know what's interesting is I was doing some research for our video today and I found out the actual dictionary definition of this word is all about like exposure to being attacked. And I can see why it's scary for most people.
I was going to say that doesn't sound fun. It doesn't sound, no, I wouldn't open myself up for that, to just be attacked.
That's right.
But what the dictionary didn't put in, what they neglected to add in is that unfortunately, much like, you know, your dog who rolls over and shows you his belly, you could attack him, but he's not going to get belly rubs.
Oh, that's true.
If he doesn't show you his belly, he's not going to get those lovely cuddles. And if we don't expose ourselves to some degree, we're not going to actually build healthy intimacy in relationships.
That's right. And I mean, Brene Brown, she says that vulnerability is the heart and the core of all intimate relationships. So how can we get to the heart of our relationships in a safe way when we're practicing healthy dating?
Totally. And from the idea of slow dating, not rushing in, taking some time to actually see if actions and words line up.
That's
to
right.
Build trust. What does vulnerability look like in that context? So we were talking about, before we came on, the idea of like there's kind of two type of people usually in the way that we all share vulnerability. And maybe like getting to know who you are in that context is the perfect starting point.
That's right. So, you know, we can look at it in the spectrum of either you're the type of person who shares too much.
The oversharer.
The overshare.
The person who sits down and tells everybody about your whole life story from the moment go, which maybe means that you didn't have a lot of boundaries in your life growing up.
Well, and I think this is about not only, you know, your own boundaries, but other people's boundaries. So if you're an overshare, you might wonder a little bit like, how are other people taking this information that you're sharing? It might be a little too much for people if you don't know them well enough, right?
Totally. Too much information for them to digest, too much vulnerability, too much, you're like exposing yourself right away.
That's right. I mean, it's one thing to live from the heart and it's one thing to be authentic, but you know, we also have to measure where and when we're sharing our personal information.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important that people don't get every bit of your personal information, your trauma background, even things that you will eventually share with them, say in a month or a couple of months, that there is a trust and a rapport that's built.
That's right.
Before that's appropriate to let go of. And that doesn't mean not being authentic.
Right.
Right? Because you can still be your authentic self, but you can like give little bit by little bit as that person is deserving of knowing you vulnerably, and as you are deserving of knowing them vulnerably.
That's right. And this is another learned skill. We're going to share some more with you over the coming little bit around even some more strategies around how to be vulnerable in a safe and healthy way.
Absolutely. So we talked about the overshare. What's on the other end of that?
I mean, the undershare, right? So yeah. I've been both. I go from one to the other. So sometimes I'll be the undershare where I realize I've been getting to know somebody. It's now been a few months and I've actually not really shared much about myself.
Ooh.
And I think what happens there is I don't want to express my needs.
Yeah.
So expressing needs is a part of vulnerability. So if I actually ask for what I need from somebody, they might not give it to me or they might let me down. And in my history, my trauma history involves me asking for things and people abandoning me. So that's one reason why I struggle with being vulnerable in relationships.
Yes, that vulnerability feels like being too exposed.
It does, yeah. Are you an undershare or an overshare?
No, I'm an overshare for sure. Which is funny. Like, Well, interesting. No, maybe I'm both.
Yeah.
Because I share a lot. Like, if you watch these videos, if you've come to my shows, if you've been in my classes, you know a lot about my history, some pretty personal, detailed things. But then I'm actually quite, not closed, but very close with my most intimate details and what's happening from day to day. And I would say I share that with my closest friends and family members, and not, a lot of people don't know the details.
Yeah.
So previously, historically, certainly as a young person, I would sit you down, tell you every bit of trauma, every single thing in the first hour that we met each other. I remember getting sober. I got sober at 13, and I would tell everybody my whole drinking history as soon as I met them.
Well, and like we're both recovered alcoholics. I got sober at 30, and so I guess I have half the amount of sober time that you do.
But a lot of sober time between the two of us.
Yeah, so I mean, I think part of, like, if you're a recovered person, you notice that 12-step programs they encourage you to get really vulnerable, and that could be a little bit confusing, because in the context of 12-step recovery programs that might be safe to do, out in the real world, maybe not so much.
Well, and I would say, there are safe places. You know what? If you go to a therapist, and I know people in my family even who go to a therapist and they will not share anything.
Oh my God.
And it's like, that's the place to share.
Yeah, you spend a lot of money to do that.
So go tell them everything. Don't wait for them to dig it out. Tell them everything. That's the place to be. Have your overshare.
It's true.
Not hold it back.
Yeah.
But definitely in life, it can be too much. But on the other side, I've had where I undershare is usually if I've been hurt, then I'll pull back. That's definitely something that's happened. And I've had friendships or relationships completely break down because suddenly I'm like, I'm not sharing vulnerably anymore.
Now, is that something that you don't say you're doing it, you just kind of pull back?
Pull back. Yeah, it's like a withholding love type situation.
I hear you.
But it's a withholding vulnerability, which will shut down the intimacy in your relationship.
Right, and that's
super quick, guys.
We can really relate that to more avoidant attachment style, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I'm the opposite end, where if somebody hurts me, I'm like, wait a second, why? What happened? I'm more like, I'll give you more. Do you want more? Aww.
Marissa. Oh, pass Rosie.
That's okay. Now we're talking to you about, we really want to cover today, if maybe you'll identify with an undershare and overshare.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll identify with being a bit of both, but we really want to talk about, how do you get to that middle place? How do you share in a centered and healthy way?
Yeah.
That's still allowing people to show up for you in a way that you need and want, and also allowing them to be who they are.
Absolutely. Creating a space between the two of you that is safe, trustworthy, essentially creating a little container. And this is what you're going to want to do once you're in your relationship, is you're going to want to create a little couple bubble.
I like that.
Right? So you're kind of setting that up. And you can do that in friendships. Like Marissa and I were just talking about this the other day, how we set up healthy attachment, secure attachment between the two of us, and interdependence in our friendship and what that looks like. And sometimes what it's going to look like is it's going to feel uncomfortable when you're not used to sharing vulnerably in a way that is appropriate, because either you're like, bleh, or you're like, sharing appropriately can feel actually pretty uncomfortable to start.
Yeah, and so when I work with clients around this issue, I'm often asking these questions. How does it feel in your body to share a little bit more? How does it feel in your body to keep things back a little bit? And that's how you can start to gauge what's right. I think you really have to test it out and take some risks at first.
Totally. And you're gauging two things. So you're gauging both how you feel, but then you're also gauging the reaction you're getting. Right? Because how you feel, you may share something vulnerably and it's completely appropriate, but you're freaking out. You're like, oh my God, what did I do?
So true.
I opened myself up. Right? So it's also gauging what happens. Does that person take a step back? Ideally what they're going to do is they're going to lean in to that vulnerability. They're going to show you that it's a safe space.
That's true.
Right? And they're going to respond in a way where they are picking up the cue that you've put out, that you are expressing vulnerability and building intimacy. And if it's at the right time in the relationship, all of that will happen. If it's early days, the person might be like, whoa, this is too much right now.
Exactly.
Right? So this is also the idea of going slow, taking time.
And also, like, figuring out, is this person safe to be vulnerable with? That is the key here. So we're speaking to you with a trauma-informed lens. So when we talk about healthy dating, we're really talking to you around, if you're someone who's experienced some trauma in your life, which who hasn't?
Hello.
You know, you probably need some support in how to understand who's safe and who's not safe.
So what does that look like? What is sharing vulnerability with somebody who's safe in a way that is appropriate? What does that look like?
I think it means, so vulnerability in itself means taking a risk.
Yeah.
So it means taking a safe and healthy risk. So we might try little things at the beginning to see, like, okay, we're testing people, we're screening people, but you know, we're not doing it in a way that's punitive or harsh. We're doing it in little ways, and I think we naturally do this anyway.
Yeah.
You know, try sharing something vulnerable that's safe though, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe not your trauma history up front.
No.
But something that's safe enough to share vulnerability and see what the person does.
So what would be like a good safe share in, say, the first week or 2 weeks of dating? What do you think?
So maybe something to do with your work, you know, something to do with your work life that's like removed from you enough.
Yeah.
But it's still like maybe a little risky. Can you give an example of that? Can you think of something?
I would say for me, like I have 2 children. A lot of people don't know that I have children because I'm quite private about my children. So I would say sharing something that it's not deeply intimate about my children, but definitely sharing about my children is important in the first couple of weeks, and that feels vulnerable, but I think it's important for the other person to know pretty early, and it's a reasonable vulnerability to share.
That makes sense. One thing I find my clients struggle with, because I work in addictions as well, is when do I share with somebody that I'm sober? When do I share with someone that I don't use marijuana or anything? Like,
I think, so this is interesting. This is the part of, like, sometimes there's some things that are fairly big shares that have to happen right away.
That's true.
And those are within the deal breaker zone. So if it's a deal breaker for you that other person is like, well, I drink every night and I get stoned on the weekends, I just do a little bump here, you know. Just a little bump.
Just a little cocaine here and there.
Cocaine, just a little to get me through. So if that's going to be a deal breaker, I think you need to share day one.
Yeah. For me, what I do is I test the waters by, you know, people often say, hey, let's go for a drink. And I'll say, well, I don't drink, but I'd love to get together with you for a coffee.
Yeah.
And if the person starts to ask me more questions, like, oh, why don't you drink? Is that a choice? Is that you just, you know, and I'll just say, this is where I'll be like very cautious about what I'm sharing, because I don't know this person. I'll say something, it's a choice. I choose not to drink. Later, as I get to know the person, I might say something like, you know, over time, you know, when I was 30, that was the point where I decided to quit drinking. I might give them a bit more information, but that as I go on, I'll share more.
And I would agree with you there. Like, I definitely share usually the first date that I don't drink, that I'm a non-drinker. And then usually it takes a good while, sometimes a long while before people hear, or it's a lot of times they don't hear my whole story ever.
Yeah.
I think my ex-husband, who I've known 21 years, was like, I was telling a story about like my youth and my drinking, and he was like, I've never heard this story before.
When I first got sober, I mean, everybody knew my story.
Yeah,
but,
me too.
You know, 15 years down the road, it's not so important. It's like, yeah, I just don't drink, and it's not really a big deal. Now, if someone wants to make a big deal out of it, then I start to wonder, like, what's going on there?
Well, and I think also too, when you share these little vulnerabilities, what's coming back to you is actually giving you clarity.
It's true.
Right? If you can look at it, like everything that happens is giving you clarity, and you are excited. You're like, awesome. That's clarity that this person is a no. Or that's clarity that this person is just going to be my friend. Or that's clarity that I'm more excited.
Clarity is a celebration. I think we should celebrate when a clear no shows up.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and I think on that note, let's talk a little bit about your friend. And I loved his 30 days of dating. Oh my gosh, he had some great Great stuff. So we're going to put a little link to him.
So again, we're talking about Marshall, who does a lot of work in the community.
Hey, Marshall.
around codependency recovery. We've mentioned him before.
Yeah.
But he was saying, like, what is safe to share or talk about in the first 30 days that is, in a healthy, slow dating style. So he was saying some good things to talk about are your interests, your goals, your fears, funny things in life that you both enjoy. And then he said, now when you start to get to know each other a bit more in the first 30 days, try saying no.
I loved that. Say no, see what happens.
Say no and see what happens.
Yeah.
Now, this is deliberate, so it's intentional. Do an intentional no. So somebody could say, hey, Marissa, do you want to do a phone call tonight?
Sorry, guys, my dog's distracting. He may need to go out. I may need to leave the video for a moment. So you continue talking about the phone call.
So, for example, maybe your dating pattern up to this point is talking on the phone every couple of nights. So you might say, actually, I can't talk on the phone tonight. I'm busy, I have other plans. And just see what the person does with that. If they're like, great, I understand, let's talk again soon. No problem, right?
Yeah.
If the person's like, what? Really? You can't talk tonight? Why? What's happening? Are you talking to somebody else? You know when you say no and someone's uncomfortable with your no.
Yeah, and that there may be some issues there. Again, clarity though. You're getting clarity. Because the idea isn't to jump in and go, this is the one.
No, we're dating from discovery. Again, Thank you, Marshall. But when we say no, we are very vulnerable in that moment.
Totally. We're sharing vulnerability, right? We're exposing ourselves to get a bad reaction.
Yes, we are.
And it's good. You want to see how that person's going to react to that no before it's a big no.
Mm-hmm. And then, again, you share something vulnerable about yourself and see what that person does with it.
Yeah.
How are they with it over time?
Absolutely.
So for your example, Rosie, like sharing that you have 2 kids, so how are they with that over time?
Well, and that's the thing is that often when I was dating, I'd share that I had kids and that people would continue to want to date with me, but often they'd be like, oh, but I don't want to talk about your kids. It's a bit weird.
And so how would that feel for you?
So that for me is a no. Mm-hmm. Right? With my last partner, one of the things I loved that when I shared that I had kids, now mind you, it is a bit weird. He's only 2 years older than my eldest child, who is 26. So that's fine, or 3 years older. So it's fine, guys. It's fine. But he was super curious. He wanted to know about my kids. He asked me questions about my kids and what it was like having children that age and what my kids were into. And that actually made me feel really comfortable that he is somebody that I could potentially involve in my whole life, which is what we want, right? We want somebody who ultimately, they are going to be our best friend. We are going to be the most vulnerable with them.
Yeah.
Somebody, I think I was reading, I can't remember who it was from. Maybe it was from Dr. Nicole. No, it was somebody else. But they had said, like, your partner, the best partners are the ones that know your trauma and can hold space for your trauma.
Wow.
Right, but that's not going to happen on the first date or probably even within the first months, maybe even the first year.
But this is where you start.
Yeah.
Try taking little risks. Say no.
Yeah.
Share safe vulnerabilities. Watch for patterns of behavior. How do they do with your no? How do they do with your vulnerabilities? And then check in. How does it feel to be this vulnerable? Does it feel safe with this person? And
it's okay for you to kind of like jump ahead a little bit and then be like,
yeah,
oh, I gotta backtrack a bit. Yeah. This is a little bit too much, bit too quick.
That's right. And then you step forward, you step back. You step forward, you step back. Yeah. And little by little you decide if this person's safe, if you feel safe, and if you can continue moving forward and sharing more vulnerability.
Yeah. I think that's lots for this week. Holy moly, guys. So we will be back next week. We're going to talk further on vulnerability. Do you remember what we were talking about?
Yeah, we're actually going to give you some specific strategies of how to be vulnerable in a safe way in the early stages of dating.
Yeehaw! Okay, well, see you then. Love you so much.